From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and ahead today, this week's Cattle Market segment featuring Lee Schulz of Iowa State University. Lee will comment on the news that the U.S. and Japan have reached an agreement on a new trade deal benefiting U.S. beef and other agricultural commodities. Then K-State's Gregg Hanzlicek on several cow herd health management considerations as summer transitions into fall. Among other things, he'll discuss vaccinations while preg-checking cows and heifers and calf vaccines at weaning time. And on this week's 4-H segment, Jeff Wickman talks with K-State's Dona Ratliff about the upcoming Cosmosphere 4-H Drone and Robot Olympics. All that and more next on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Thanks for tuning in once again for Agriculture Today as we take up the cattle markets to get this Monday edition rolling. With us via phone is Lee Schulz. Lee, as you know, is a livestock economist at Iowa State University. Quite an array of things to talk about this week, Lee, especially on the trade front, which we'll get into. Just looking back, though, at last week's market action, again, not anything dramatic, but the cash-fed trade was very modestly higher. Futures not exactly doing great things, but how would you characterize the market?
Certainly cash prices have been buoying the market if we've at least seen any support. I think when you look at futures prices, you can really see that they are grossly oversold. We did put a bit of a dent in it this last week with futures being up every day except for Friday. I think Friday was reacting to the negative news with China and the additional tariffs. But I think we're still working back from early August when we did see that swoon in prices with the fire in Holcomb, Kansas, and the Tyson plant there. I think the feeder cattle market, I think, is kind of an interesting case here where we've actually seen some support, at least kind of in the near-term contracts there, to prices back to kind of pre-early August levels. So I think there is some indication that we've seen a bit of support in the market. You really got to point to cash trade basis level of $6 to $7 over, at least here in Iowa. I think is helping to support futures prices at least somewhat kind of in this price swoon that we've seen.
You mentioned it right there. The markets managed to avoid the sustained collapse in the wake of that Tyson plant shutdown, which speaks to the resilience of this market, doesn't it?
I think it points directly towards how strong beef demand currently is. And really, I think a lot of the news has revolved around how strong box beef prices are in the wake of weakening cash prices for cattle and futures prices. But I think that the big takeaway is beef demand is still rather strong, and we're kind of working through these kind of unexpected gyrations in the market, realizing that slaughter levels are pretty heavy at this time of the year. And so that was going to put some pressure on these markets. So I think some of the lower prices were somewhat expected. I think we did take a bit more out of it than we did expect with the unexpected fire event. But overall, I think the beef demand situation is helping prices, certainly, and I think will help maybe give some direction to these markets as we get into the next couple of months.
And in just a few moments, we'll talk about the latest international trade gyrations and what they mean to potential beef demand. But let's pick up on that USDA cattle on feed report released on Friday. There are a few friendly numbers within that report.
Certainly, if you're looking for some bullish news in kind of the wake of where markets have currently been at, the cattle on feed report does give some of that news. Overall, I think numbers were pretty much within the range of pre-report expectations, especially when you look at the August 1 cattle on feed number and the number marketed in July. Just kind of a bit of a noteworthy number is the August 1 cattle on feed number continued the string of larger year-over-year numbers and was the largest since 1996 for that August 1 number. So it shows we have larger cattle on feed numbers. Probably the biggest bullish news in that was the placed in July number. So that was down over 2% or 37,000 head lower than a year ago. That comes in the wake of we actually had one more placement date in July. And so that would have said maybe we could have seen that number a little bit higher. But I think really what that points to, and the placement data backs that up, is we have tremendous forage conditions out there right now. And so you're seeing placements down because we're holding those cattle on grass a little bit longer. Placement weights show that, and you've seen a tick up in 800-pound and greater placements, but less than 800 pounds, you've seen that number lower than a year ago.
You mentioned it there because of the fine grass conditions we see around and about. Does that mean to say that later on this fall we might see a rush of cattle to the feed yards because of those cattle finally coming off grass?
I certainly think, we do have more cattle available this year, and the mid-year cattle inventory report showed that kind of as expected as we've increased the national herd. I think what may help moderate that situation is, we do have continued good forage conditions, so that will, I think, still spread out these marketings of calves as we get into the fall. Also, I think as you look at feeder cattle futures prices, they're not looking all that attractive kind of near term, which suggests calf feeder cattle prices, margins for cow-calf producers aren't all that great. So you could see some possibly additional backgrounding this year and targeting later markets because of the low feed costs, be it corn prices or be it forage availability, could help trigger some of that. So I think that could help spread out some of those marketings, and we won't get a big purge of feeders come this fall. One factor that could put a little bit of a wrench in that is I think we've seen really strong cull cow prices, and so we could see a bit of more of early weaning this year and capturing some of those higher cull cow prices, and so that could put a few more feeder calves on the market this fall.
And do want to mention quickly here the latest USDA cold storage report. The main indicator there was that we've more than ample red meat supplies out there.
Certainly when you look across the board, it really matches the production we have this year of larger red meat and poultry production, and some of that's showing up in the cold storage, kind of as we would expect. But I think there's a bit of bullish news when we look at the beef cold storage report. We had 6% lower than a year ago levels. It still is a bit higher than the 5-year average. Really, we did kind of get a ratchet up from June to July. Most of that shows up in boneless product. I think that can be rationalized because we've seen such strong box beef prices. So I think we've seen wholesalers getting that into the cold storage market. I think we will see a big purge of that as we get into Labor Day, and a lot of the featuring there. Features have been tremendous for retailers. We've seen a lot of product being moved through those features, and so I think we will work through those supplies that we have pretty good.
Well, to the trade scene, and the more encouraging thing was announced just yesterday, as it appears that the U.S. and Japan are about to enter into a new trade deal which favors the sale of U.S. agricultural commodities into Japan, and of course that market is a major outlet for U.S. beef. So what are you hearing about that, and what are the ramifications of it?
So this is tremendous news. Japan is our largest market by volume and by value, and it has been a consistent market for some time. They are very loyal customers, and the industry has done a tremendous job to really foster that relationship. The latest news from President Trump and the administration is that there's a deal agreed to in principle that would have effectively reduce our tariff and non-tariff barriers into Japan and really put us on more equal playing field with Europe and other TPP countries and that agreement that has gone forward.
So we could potentially see an escalation in sales to Japan if all of that shakes out, it sounds.
That's certainly the hope. And really, when you look at Japan so far this year, their accumulated exports through the mid-August are down 8% year over year. Now, we've seen growth the last several years, so we are playing a bit of a numbers game there, but realizing that we've seen, declines this year over year, and the additional products we have available on the market, I think this is major news for the beef industry.
Very good. Now, on the other side of the coin, Lee, that trade rift with China, the saga continues. And again, we don't sell much beef to China directly. But as this continues, the opportunity for any kind of sales to China is off the table, and this is detrimental to the beef trade.
Yes, you're exactly right. When we look at China, and it is very minimal, the amount of beef that we do send there, but realizing that the market potential is really enormous. So it's not necessarily about today's sales, but it's about growing the future potential. And I think as it impacted the futures market, as we've seen on Friday, these new tariffs on U.S. goods and beef and pork being one of them impact interest rates and the U.S. dollar. And all of that reverberates through and impacts commodity prices. So even though we sell a very minimal amount of beef to China, we've seen that reacted just because of the integrated nature of these markets.
With the Japan trade deal, and if that USMCA does clear Congress and is put into effect, hopefully that will be enough to really support the beef cattle industry for some time, irrespective of what happens with China, Lee.
That's certainly the case. I think the more certainty we can get in this market, the better. We've shown strong domestic demand, and that can certainly carry us rather far, but we certainly need that export trade to continue to grow, to potentially hold values where they're at or further escalate prices potentially.
Much to talk about here. Lee, we appreciate you covering it with us, and we will catch up with you again in a few weeks. Many thanks to you.
All right, thank you.
Lee Schulz, livestock economist at Iowa State University, with those remarks on what's going on in the cattle markets. This is Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now on the K-State Radio Network, and we are brought by once again to talk bovine animal health with us, the director of the Production Animal Field Investigations Unit, Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory here at Kansas State University, Gregg Hanzlicek. And Gregg, we have an assortment of things we want to cover, particularly for the cow-calf producer out there, but as you observe what disease incidents and other health problems have been reported to the laboratory this year, it's been a relatively quiet summer, you say.
It has, and going into the summer, there were a lot of us who've proven ourselves wrong. We thought it was going to be a monumental year for blue-green algae because of all the heat we'd had and the sunlight and the light winds, and we thought it'd be a really banner year for anaplasmosis, too, because of the tick explosion and the fly explosion. Of course, there's always some of those cases, but we haven't seen the epidemics that we expected for those two diseases. We did have some eye problems early in the pasture season when the grass headed out so early and it was lacerating the eyes, but that's kind of quieted down a little bit. Also, I think probably the thing that we're hearing most about and dealing with most is foot rot, which is understandable because the animals are standing a lot in mud and their feet aren't being able to dry, and the skin, the integrity of the skin breaks, and then we get the foot rot. But those other things, like I said, we predicted it was going to be not a very good year for cow-calf producers, and it hasn't been as bad as we thought it was going to be.
So is it a matter of simply having dodged the collective bullet here, or was something going more in the favor of the producer that you could identify anyway?
I don't know, but I'm a big believer that nutrition on the cow-calf side is the foundation for all good things, and the grass, and we don't know about the quality, but just looking at the cows, I just wonder if the nutrition hasn't been better than usual, and good nutrition and better immunity. Mm-hmm. Those animals just do better if they're on a high plane of nutrition, and I'm just wondering if that's not what it is.
Yeah, it's good news that none of those things really materialized to such a severe degree as once was thought, but it pays, you say, as well, and this is what we'll spend most of our time on, Gregg, in looking ahead as cow-calf producers to what they need to manage from this point forward. And in that grass has been in really good shape for most cow herds, there may be a chance for a producer to hold off on the protein supplementation, you say.
Absolutely. Usually at this time of year, the grass is starting to, because of the dryness and the heat, the grasses in the pasture are starting to turn brown and become dormant, and we know that's when the protein content of the grass is decreasing, and that's when we recommend producers start providing a protein supplement to cows. But we do a lot of driving around the state, and the pastures are plenty of grass out there, and it's still green. So in our recommendation is hold off on any protein supplement and just keep watching the cows and watch the grass out there. And then when it turns dormant and turns brown, those cows' manure will become stiffer, which tells you that they need protein. But at this point in time, we'd say let's hold off on purchasing any protein supplement for those cows because we don't think they actually need it.
But you say watch the condition of the grass, but also cow body score.
Body score is one thing, absolutely. The cows today, if producers go out and they look at their cows, that's the perfect condition that they would want to calve. They'll just have a more successful calving season. What they'll notice even before body condition changes is if when those cows get on a protein-deficient diet, the manure, instead of having that normal cow patty, we call it, it'll start stacking up. And when you see that, there's two things you think of, is water availability, which we're going to have, but the other one is they're short on protein in their diet.
So keep an eye on all of that, but no need to pull the trigger on supplementation in most cases just yet. It would probably behoove the producer, though, to preg-check their cows soon.
As veterinarians, we always recommend that. I mean, we like to preg-check, of course, but it does make sense to try to remove those open cows. Even though there's plenty of grass in the pasture, if the market dictates now's the time to sell those open cows, let's get them out of those pastures. But certainly let's preg-check and remove those open cows before we have to start supplementing, and certainly before we have to start providing winter feed for those cows.
Now, if Gregg, the producer's going to the trouble of preg-checking soon, would it be worthwhile to double down and provide a vaccine at this point in time while running her through the chute?
Well, that's a great question, and it depends on the herd. And I really recommend that producers talk to their veterinarian and talk about the vaccination program. What vaccines do we need to give to our pregnant cows? Either scar vaccine, or do we need to protect them against some respiratory or abortion diseases? But that's a discussion between the producer and the veterinarian for sure.
You, though, caution about what vaccine one would choose here. There might be an inherent danger, you say, in utilizing a modified live product.
Yes, correct. There are multiple modified live vaccines out there that are labeled for use in pregnant cows, but those cows have to have had that vaccine, the same vaccine, administered them within the previous 12 months. And even though those vaccines have been shown to be safe if followed directions, at our diagnostic lab, we fairly often in the spring diagnose IBR abortions. And when we compare the virus that's in the fetus to the vaccines, a lot of times it's vaccine, and it was just the fact that a modified live was given to pregnant cows when it shouldn't have been. They should have been given a killed vaccine instead of a modified live.
So it was introduced inadvertently here, and obviously losing calves that way, not a good situation.
Absolutely. Again, that's why we highly recommend to talk to the veterinarian. Your veterinarian will know your vaccination program, and a modified live of these pregnant cows may be totally acceptable or needed, but I would make sure that they sign off on it and say, yep, that's what we need to do.
Gregg, on the calf side, there might be the opportunity to wean those calves fairly soon as well, and there are some management considerations here too, of course.
Yeah, and maybe every owner has their own time for weaning, and it looks like the grass is such that we can probably keep those pairs out there longer, but it's not too early to think about it. We're getting to the part of the year where we'll have to wean, and so some of the things we would think about is when should we think about weaning, and then from that it would be when do we want to give that first vaccination dose, because we'd like to give it to those calves prior to weaning. When do we want to plan to do that? And then it goes back to the vaccine on the cows. What vaccine should we choose for our calves? And again, highly recommend to go through the practitioner to decide that.
But how much ahead of weaning time should one vaccinate?
We recommend 2 to 4 weeks before weaning, and then a vaccine somewhere at weaning or just after, sometime in that time zone, but 2 doses would be very, very important. And then at weaning, the other thing to talk about with the practitioner is we need to deworm those calves. What deworming product or products do we need to incorporate into our herd management plan?
There's not only a health management component, but a marketing component to these preconditioned calves if you're intending to sell right away.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's some premiums that people can receive for animals that have been vaccinated and preconditioned, and so if producers are selling in those type of market, need to plan ahead and make sure that they're doing the things they need to do to get that premium.
And you brought up one other thing. If one's intending on retaining those weaned calves, backgrounding them, the feeding area ought to be tidied up here soon, you say, for disease control purposes.
Absolutely. And if they're coming into a dry lot situation, we recommend, it's not always easy to do, but still recommend that as much of the adult manure that's been there over the last year be cleaned up. The other thing is that the biggest coccidia disasters that we deal with in the diagnostic lab are in pens of calves that are in dry lot situations where there's an area in the pen that accumulates water. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is that water becomes contaminated with the coccidia organism. And even if there's a stock tank or electric water, where do calves like to drink? They like to drink out of those holes. And then a lot of times we'll have a coccidia explosion. And so if at all possible, maybe haul in some dirt and try to take care of some of those low areas in the corners and around the fences and things.
One important final item, and we've been talking in recent years about troubles that have emerged because of a deficiency of vitamin A in the cow herd, and that might be something you would want to think about in the supplemental program.
Absolutely. We started seeing vitamin A deficiency in beef cow-calf herds a couple years ago when the vitamin A supply was limited. And so there were minerals out there that didn't contain any vitamin A. Some of them took the vitamin A out. Some of them were low levels. And that causes what we typically see are weak or stillborn calves due to vitamin A deficiency. So highly recommend that you talk to your veterinarian or your nutritionist and make sure that your product has sufficient vitamin A in there. And then we can't forget that those cows have to consume it. So I highly recommend that we monitor, and they should be eating anywhere from 2 to 4 ounces per head per day. And if you assure that, you're going to prevent your vitamin A deficiencies most of the time.
And you would be providing that how soon, even as they're still on grass?
The green grass is going to have plenty of vitamin A, so whatever's in their pasture mineral is acceptable level. But once that grass starts going dormant, especially as we get into late fall, early winter, then yes, that mineral, the amount of vitamin A needs to be boosted up to a much, much higher level.
Well, as you said earlier, all is relatively calm out there in as far as cow herd health, but stay on top of these matters, and good input as always. Gregg, thanks for being along with us. Gregg Hanzlicek, over from the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory here at Kansas State University. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. in our 95th year of broadcast service to Kansas agriculture. This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Next up, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Once again, President Donald Trump and Japan Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced yesterday that the two countries have reached a trade deal that will involve large Japanese purchases of U.S. corn and wheat. In a report earlier in the weekend, Nikkei, the Japanese news organization, reported that Japan had agreed to grant the U.S. the same level of tariffs on agricultural products that other countries have received through the Trans-Pacific Partnership in exchange for an exemption from President Trump's proposal to increase auto tariffs. Messrs. Trump and Abe both said they probably will be signing this deal during the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York in September. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue pointed out that Japan is, in his words, a significant market for U.S. agricultural exports, making today a good day for American agriculture. And U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer added that Japan is our third largest agricultural market, importing about $14 billion worth of U.S. agricultural products. In his words, this will open up markets to over $7 billion of those products. In the agricultural area, it will be a major benefit, he says, for beef, pork, wheat, dairy products, wine, ethanol, and a variety of other products. And he said it will lead to substantial reductions in tariffs and non-tariff barriers across the board. He gave an example. Japan is by far our biggest beef market. He said that we sell over $2 billion worth of beef to Japan. This allows us to compete more effectively with people across the board, particularly the TPP countries and with Europe. Now, the provisions of the deal won some early praise in the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee Chairman Pat Roberts among those welcoming the deal. This would put, he says in his words, U.S. agriculture on an even basis with TPP member nations. Meantime, President Trump late Friday afternoon announced that higher tariffs would be slapped on Chinese products following the similar action against U.S. products announced by China earlier in the day on Friday. $250 billion in Chinese products now subject to 25% tariffs, instead facing a 5% higher tariff starting October the 1st, then putting those tariffs for those products right at 30%. Further, another $300 billion in goods that was facing new 10% tariffs starting September the 1st, will now face 15% tariffs instead. The president's decision came after Chinese officials earlier on Friday announced higher tariffs on $75 billion in U.S. products. Soybeans will face a 5% higher tariff starting September the 1st. That will put tariffs against U.S. soybeans at 30%. Pork and beef will face 10% higher tariffs as well on September the 1st. Now, China had already announced earlier in the month it will stop buying U.S. agricultural products for now. If the new tariffs would go into effect, U.S. pork would face a 60% retaliatory tariff, along with a 12% standard duty from China. The tariff hike, a blow for U.S. pork producers, which had seen rising sales to China. The pork industry also had been anticipating even more demand from China because of African swine fever devastating that country's hog herd. If you're curious to know how the USDA made its calculations for trade damage estimates in that market facilitation program, the details are now available online. Here's more on that from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
USDA has issued details of how it calculated the estimated damage from trade disruptions in its latest support package for farmers announced in July. 2 years of trade damage methodology reports for 2018 and 2019 are featured on the homepage of USDA's Office of the Chief Economist. Farm Service Agency Administrator Richard Fordyce says the market facilitation program's rates took many pieces of information into consideration.
That county-specific per-acre rate was developed by using historical planted acres by commodity in that county, historical yields of those commodities in that county, and then applying a factor that represents or reflects the amount of trade disruption, trade damage by commodity.
To see the list of all the unique county rates, go online to farmers.gov/MFP and click on the choice that says, How do payments work? This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And next up on Agriculture Today, the weekly feature from the Kansas Forest Service here at Kansas State University Tree Tales. Standing by is K-State forester Bob Atkinson. Bob?
Research in the journal Science suggests good news for addressing climate change. Plant trees, maybe 1 trillion of them. The study suggests there is 3.5 million square miles, an area roughly the size of the United States, available for new tree plantings, even with existing cities and farmland. The study calculated that over the decades, those trees could suck up nearly 830 billion tons of heat-trapping carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. That's about as much carbon pollution as humans have spewed in the last 25 years. According to Thomas Crowther, co-author of the study, planting trees is by far the cheapest climate change solution and the most effective. I agree. The study found that Russia, China, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and the United States have the most land available. The Switzerland-based researchers found that adding 1.2 trillion trees would reverse 10 years' worth of harmful emissions. Over the decades, new tree plantings could absorb about 200 billion tons of carbon from our atmosphere. Scientists, including Crowther, however, are quick to point out that planting trees alone will not solve the problem. Trees absorb carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gases, which traps heat in the atmosphere, leading to rising temperatures and climate change. How does this translate to a primary prairie state like Kansas? There are 2 significant tree planting opportunities in our state: the reforestation of our riparian areas adjacent to our streams, which will also improve water quality and quantity, and the reintroduction of field windbreaks as a conservation practice to reduce wind erosion and increase crop yields. The Kansas Forest Service has professional foresters who can help farmers and ranchers plan and design tree planting projects throughout the state. Why not give us a call at 785-532-3300 or check us out on the web at www.kansasforest.org. This is Bob Atkinson with the Kansas Forest Service, inviting you to engage in the simple act of planting trees. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Many thanks, Bob. As always, Jeff Wickman is awaiting with this week's 4-H segment. That's next on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. Space tech is one of the fastest-growing project areas for Kansas 4-H youth. This project area includes astronomy, which focuses on things outside the Earth's atmosphere, computers, which includes computer technology and computer programming, robotics, which is essentially how to automate things, or more simply put, how to make things do stuff for us, rocketry, which focuses on how to build and fly rockets, and unmanned aerial systems, more commonly referred to as UAS or drones, which helps 4-H youth better understand how these systems can be used in a variety of ways to enhance our lives, such as crop surveying, aerial photography, and counting wildlife. Kansas 4-H youth interested in space tech can participate in the Cosmosphere 4-H Drone and Robot Olympics, which is being held October 4th and 5th at the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson. The registration deadline, though, is September 20th. Kansas 4-H Program Coordinator Dona Ratliff joins us now to preview this upcoming adult-child experience, which provides an introduction education about drones and robots. Donna, there's an opportunity for 4-H youth to take part in the Cosmosphere 4-H Drone and Robot Olympics. That will be in early October.
Yes, we have the Olympics going on down at the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, October 4th. and 5th. It is inviting youth between 9 and 18 years old to come down and participate in some really cool activities with drones and robots through the Cosmosphere. We do ask that a chaperone comes with each of those members, so that is part of our requirement, of course. But it'll be a fun event there at the Cosmosphere.
Yeah, and the reason for that chaperone is the fact that this is an overnight camping activity as well.
Absolutely. The adults are responsible for their children through the overnight hours. Some of us lucky chaperones get to go as well. But yes, that is the need behind that.
There is a cost for this because it is an overnight event. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. To put the event on and everything, there is a cost. So for the youth to participate, it is $115. And we ask that there's $90 for the chaperones as well. That covers those base meals and things and such and the supplies for the event itself.
And this really is an overnight camping event. You're asking them to bring some of the basics.
Absolutely. They do need to bring their own bedding and such like that. They'll be staying in the facility itself at the Cosmosphere. So, yeah, you'll need to bring your sleeping bags.
This sounds like a place that you've been before.
Actually, I've only been there once, and it was not for an overnight, so I'm kind of looking forward to this, yes.
What are some of the things that they're going to learn, and I guess you will learn as well?
Exactly. So they're going to split between a robot group and a drone group during their times there and learn the training activities for each of those, so they'll actually man the vehicles by the end and get to learn a little bit about behind the scenes like that.
So this is really an extension of that Space Tech project area?
It is. They're going to learn some programming, and so they'll be really working in those robots, working with the sensors and how to pilot those drones and things like that.
And then have a chance to also really take in what goes on at the Cosmosphere.
Right. There's going to be a planetarium show, the Dome program, just some really neat opportunities for both the youth and the adults to enjoy.
If somebody's interested in registering for this event, how can they do that?
If you go to the Kansas 4-H website and look on the right-hand side of the screen, there will be a calendar of events, and listed in there will be the Cosmosphere 4-H Drone and Robot Olympics. And you'll follow the link there to register.
And if somebody is involved in the Space Tech program, this is really a perfect opportunity for them to learn more.
It is. It's a great pathway to already build on what they've been working on, but it's a great entryway as well. If you're new to it and just kind of excited and want to learn more, this is a very good stepping stone.
Nice way to spend a little bit of extra time with mom, dad, or even a grandma or grandpa.
Absolutely. We've had grandparents that come in, or even an adult brother over 18. The experience is open to 4-H members, parents, grandparents, if there's a volunteer leader or things like that.
Could be somebody from the club, too, then.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Donna, let's talk a little bit about your other responsibilities. You are a program coordinator for 4-H. What are some of the other things that you're working on day to day?
Our big focus, of course, right now is prepping for the Kansas State Fair, and we are in full swing right now with that, getting all the entries in, getting all the cards and labels run, and so that is our big project going on right now.
And then after that, you're going to have to take part in the Olympics too, right?
I will be at the Olympics. We are working on a Science of Agriculture event that's coming up. Part of that will actually happen at the State Fair as well, but then there'll be a campus event following that in early November.
Yeah, we should mention that the Space Tech program actually will have some displays and some exhibits going on at the State Fair.
That is very true. Yes, there'll be some project posters and things like that will be at the State Fair as well.
I know this is probably the focus of your day, but are you spending almost all of your time just focusing in on the State Fair?
Pretty much right now, yes. The State Fair is I would say about 90% of my day is going to be focused on State Fair projects right now.
And you'll be spending time at the State Fair as well?
I will be probably there about 85% of the time.
You're kind of the boots on the ground and keeping everybody moving in the right direction?
This is new for me, but yeah, I'm one of. I am not the only. There's a big handful that will be working with that.
All right. And as we mentioned before, there is an opportunity to find out more about Kansas 4-H in general, and they can look at all of the different programs online at kansas4h.org.
Yes.
That's Kansas 4-H Program Coordinator Dona Ratliff. Again, for more information or to get registered for the Cosmosphere 4-H Drone and Robot Olympics being held October 4th and 5th at the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, visit kansas4h.org, kansas4h.org, or contact your local county or district extension office. The registration fee, which includes 3 meals and the overnight stay, is $115 for youth ages 9 to 18 and $90 for all adult chaperones. The Cosmosphere collaboration is designed to be an adult-child experience where 4-H members and adults can interact and learn from a variety of fun and educational experiences involving science, technology, and engineering. Again, the registration deadline is September 20th. For more information, kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for the Monday edition of Agriculture Today. Don't forget to listen to the podcast version of Agriculture Today. Visit agtoday.net. Or using a podcast app on your mobile device, type these search keywords, Agriculture Today, Kansas, and you'll find this program. Simply tap the subscribe button and brand new episodes of Agriculture Today will automatically arrive on your device every weekday. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.